Episode 5. Bloody hell. Well, spoilers ahead. They leave Numenor at last. The Harfoots have a bit of a scare on their migration, and Durin and Elrond's friendship is strained by their oath. And we are reminded, of course, that this is not properly Lord of the Rings. First up, I shall speak about the Harfoot migration. They've been making their way down the River Anduin past the Emyn Muil and through the area which was later known as the Dead Marshes. Then they look like they are moving across the northern fences of the Ash Mountains of would-be Mordor towards Rhûn. Now, the main focus is on the stranger and Nori, who has been teaching him some new words. Now, in the beginning of the episode, she tells him that he is good because he is there to help the Brandyfoots. At least she thinks he is, and Nori probably believes that is the reason why he crashed to the earth close to them. Even at this point, he thinks that he is the peril due to the fireflies in the beginning, and I'm beginning to feel like that is just a parlor trick for what he is actually capable or what he might end up doing. So he does his ground slam and hurts his arm in doing so, and then he goes to the water to cast the spell, and as the water froze and crystallized up his arm, Nori touches him and is then gripped by the same incantation too. I think she has maybe been bound by some very dark spell here and is now a target for the stranger who needs it for whatever the purpose is, because there's some kind of like malicious look on him, and he really is now the peril for her. See, the reason for his coming to the Harfoots may not have been to help them or Nori, but it was to use them. This whole time they've been traveling further south towards the very place where the orcs and Adar have been massing their legions. But in addition to that, you have a few instances of forearms being marked. Waldreg and Theo have the marks from the sword, and then now we hear that the sword may be a key to some evil machination. And I'll get to that subject a little later on. These pallid inspectors of the crash site of the stranger are the reason as to why I think he is a peril. These ominous characters are not the good guys. Well, are they? And as the enemy is looking for a key, and this meteor is seen as a sign of the times, then it makes sense that he would be in demand, given that the scene immediately after is of Adar looking up at the sunlight. You can infer what his diabolical plan is. Oh, and didn't the stranger say easier in the dark too when his caravan entered the Wolfwoods? Bronwyn's speech, it was so inspirational, so poignant, that I almost thought that it was the UK PM Liz Truss, and I probably would have left at the same time as Waldreg did too, although I probably would have not left with him. Okay, so about Waldreg meeting Adar, he swears fealty to Sauron. You might wonder from his reaction whether or not this is Sauron, but then Sauron is not a name that Sauron himself chose, nor did he enjoy, because Sauron is Quenya for abhorred, but perhaps Waldreg wouldn't know that. He is calling his new master a piece of excrement to his face. It does also serve to retain the mystery of who Adar actually is, but yeah. The Tower of Ostirith itself then. The Prime Video X-Ray lets us know that in the previous war, the men loyal to Morgoth built this tower and the elves just came and occupied it, hence this link to the past with this odd design on the wall. It goes without saying that this is original Amazon. Arondir thinks that the sword hilt, which we know was made for Morgoth's followers, is used as a key for a ritual tied to either A, enslave the people, or perhaps the land, or B, giving the orcs a home. And we know that a tunnel has been finished, which will lead to the sun being no longer visible, and Orodruin is nearby. What I didn't quite understand was when they said that when they march upon us, this tower will fall, and this prompted like a eureka moment for them. Are they implying that toppling it upon the orcs will allow the refugees to escape this cul-de-sac? On to Lindon, we hear that Gil-galad and Celebrimbor actually already knew that mithril had been discovered in Khazad-dûm before Elrond was sent there, as the High King says that the blight of the tree had began before Galadriel returned from the north, and perhaps this is what the meeting for the Elf Lords was for in episode 1, hence he wasn't let in on the information until now, when his knowledge and relationship with the dwarves is desperately needed. I think the more insulting here thing here is that Gil-galad is trying to get Elrond to break an oath. Oaths are sacred in Middle-earth, and after all, that's the sole reason for Gil-galad and Elrond actually still being in Middle-earth rather than in Valinor, as it was the Oath of Fëanor that brought the Noldor to these shores. It drove them to the 3 kinslayings and personally affected Gil-galad and Elrond, and still the oath was held by the surviving sons Maedhros and Maglor. Of course, Gil-galad now has a duty of care to all elves, so he probably would do anything that he could to, he's going to give it everything. What of this song of the roots of the Heithaglir? It sounds like something that Tolkien could have actually written, but no, this is completely original for the series here, as an origin story for Mithril. Now, a tree on the peak had the last Silmaril. One was in the heavens with Eärendil, one was thrown into the sea by Maglor, and Maedhros launched himself into a fiery fault of the earth with the third. Now, there had been some speculation by some people that the Arkenstone could have been one of the Silmarils, but I'd say that is more likely than one being stuck in a tree on top of a mountain. Anyway, this is just elven prophecy, right? But this battle between the elf versus the Balrog honestly sounds like more of a prediction of the Battle of the Peak between Gandalf the Grey and Durinsbane. Then too, lightning reed the peak, and Gandalf had a heart as pure as Manwë, whom he served in Aman, and he sacrificed all of his light and mortal being to defeat the Balrog. The result was as pure and light as good, as strong and unyielding as evil. Gandalf the White. Now, anyhow, in this iteration, the mithril ore contains the light of a Silmaril, and now every elf needs a little to recharge their battery, despite a large portion weren't alive or even in Aman to experience the light of the 2 trees, such as Círdan the Shipwright. And so Prince Durin, he's not entirely surprised when he hears of the ulterior motives of the elves, because he had suspected as much, but clearly his friendship with Elrond isn't marred, even though maybe in the first 2 episodes it kind of felt like this would have destroyed it. But anyway, I think the chemistry between the 2 is great, and they have some of the best interactions in the show. Of course, this also works in the prince's favor, because as we saw in the previous episode, his father wants to completely seal off the mithril veins, and so this trade will hopefully keep them open for the benefit of everyone. On Numenor, things are gearing up for the expedition to Middle-earth, and there are some that are opposed to it, as is kind of to be expected with any war. I thought that maybe I missed a part of an episode or something, because there's no explanation of why Eärien and Kemen are so against it, though. And Kemen had a chat with his father, who told him that it is folly to swim against the tide. Again, with the seafaring metaphors, by the way. And yet, this still wasn't enough to change his mind. I don't understand what his motive is. And Eärien seems to be that perhaps she doesn't want her family to go. Did her dinner date lead to dessert with Kemen, and now she has a child on the way? I just don't understand. And it seems bland. The major focus on the Isle is upon the fateful heart-to-heart between Gal and Hal towards the end of the episode, though. Halbrand is really against going back to the Southlands, and in doing so, he'd be breaking his own oath of never returning. He reminds Galadriel that not so long ago, men like me fought alongside the orcs. Did he betray his own people? Did he collude with the orcs? As he says this to Galadriel, things that he did to survive, they show the image of Waldreg and his gathering surrendering to Adar. Now, just like in some videos on YouTube, that which is being said and being shown in the foreground are linked to point the finger towards, the director's thoughts. Last episode, Galadriel, she exposed her vulnerability to Miriel, and Halbrand digs out her torturous past so that he can have some moral collateral to be able to trust her convictions, because he finally learns that she is actually completely driven by a lust for vengeance. Now, there was the Elrond's betrayal, her company's mutiny, and that she largely became the evil that she was trying to oust. In a life or death situation like a war zone, then someone like that may not be the most trustworthy if they see you as a tool. Now, I don't think it's quite so black and white, but there's definitely a shade of grey there. This resonates with Halbrand, though, so perhaps all the above is what they have in common, but we just haven't heard much of his past yet, so that makes this relationship a little bit uneven. It was a nice touch for Galadriel to actually quote her brother in this context from episode 1. Sometimes to find the light, we must first touch the darkness. Now, I wonder what the significance of Halbrand leaving his house sigil behind has then, because, well, I could probably guess, but it would be way off. So I'll just leave it there. But it will be interesting to know who is equally interested in this object to come and snatch it immediately off the blacksmith's table. All right, and so finally, the interesting things I noticed. Celebrimbor once again uses an anecdote of Eärendil the mariner to strengthen the resolve of Elrond to do something useful. He did this in the last episode to get Elrond to delve deep to find out where the mithril was. Given what we know now, this is some manipulation that you perhaps wouldn't deem friendly, as Elrond is clearly vulnerable to wanting to live up to his father's legacy. Okay, and then Miriel speaks to her dementia-ridden father, who they seem distressed. He says that darkness is there in Middle-earth. You'd think it was Sauron that he had foreseen, but then the camera cuts to the scene where the stranger is doing his healing chant with the water to ice. So I'll just leave that there. Oh, and have we also forgotten that there is evidence that mithril was mined on Numenor too, given that items such as the Elendilmir, or the Star of Elendil, which was later used for the crown of Arnor and Gondor by Elendil, Isildur, and Aragorn, this was crafted with mithril. And so, yeah, that probably came from Numenor, and this comes from the Unfinished Tales. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm trying to make these a little bit shorter. Come back soonish for episode 6 overview. Yeah, nothing else to say. Good day.